The billionaire's hands are shaking as he reads the hidden blood test results his housekeeper just found. His 6-year-old daughter has 3 weeks to live, and someone's been hiding it from him for months. The nanny who knew everything has vanished without a trace, and $50 million hangs in the balance. Before we dive in, comment where in the world you are watching from, and don't forget to click subscribe. The blood test results trembled in Keisha Washington's hands as she stood in the marble foyer of the Ashford estate, and for the first time in her 3 weeks working as the new housekeeper, she understood why 6-year-old Emma had been crying every night. The previous nanny hadn't quit because of the demanding hours or the impossible father. She'd quit because she was hiding something that would destroy this family, and Keisha had just found it tucked inside an old medical textbook in the servants' quarters, pages marked with desperate notes in handwriting that wasn't Emma's mother's, because Emma's mother had died 2 years ago, in circumstances no one would talk about. The results showed elevated enzyme levels consistent with a rare degenerative condition, dated 8 weeks ago, and someone had written in angry red ink across the top, "He can't know. Too much money at stake." Keisha's heart hammered against her ribs as footsteps echoed down the grand staircase. Marcus Ashford descended like a storm in human form, all sharp angles and controlled fury wrapped in a $15,000 suit that somehow made him look more dangerous rather than refined. His blue eyes, the kind that seemed to see straight through people's carefully constructed lies, landed on Keisha with the precision of a predator who'd caught movement in his peripheral vision. She shoved the papers behind her back, feeling the expensive cardstock crumple against her spine, and tried to arrange her face into something that resembled calm professionalism, instead of the terror clawing up her throat. "Ms. Washington," he said, his voice carrying that particular quality of men who were used to being obeyed without question. Emma's tutor called. Again. "She says my daughter threw books at her during the mathematics lesson. 3rd incident this week. You've been here 3 weeks. I hired you because your references claimed you had a gift with difficult children. I'm beginning to question those references." He paused at the bottom of the stairs, adjusting platinum cufflinks that probably cost more than Keisha's car. "Care to explain why my daughter's behavior has deteriorated since you arrived?" Keisha felt her jaw tighten, that old familiar anger rising, the one that had gotten her fired from her last position when she'd told a wealthy Manhattan socialite exactly what she thought about how the woman spoke to her cleaning staff. But this was different. This wasn't about pride or standing up for herself. This was about a little girl who was dying, and nobody seemed to know except a nanny who'd run away, and a housekeeper who'd stumbled onto secrets that felt like holding lit dynamite. "Mr. Ashford," she started, choosing her words carefully. "Maybe Emma's acting out because she's scared. Kids don't throw things without reason. They're not just little chaos machines. They're trying to communicate something they don't have words for." Marcus's expression hardened, that muscle in his jaw jumping the way it did whenever someone dared to contradict him. "My daughter has everything a child could want. Private tutors, a bedroom that looks like something from a fairy tale, more toys than she could use in 10 lifetimes. What exactly does she have to be scared of?" The papers burned against Keisha's back. "Dying." She wanted to scream. "Your daughter is dying, and someone has been hiding it from you, and I don't know why, but I know it has something to do with money and fear and secrets that have been festering in this house like rot behind expensive wallpaper." Instead, she said, "Loss." She lost her mother. That kind of pain doesn't care about toy collections. She watched his face close off, watched him rebuild those walls so quickly it was like watching a castle gate slam shut. "And maybe," Keisha continued, pushing even though she knew she shouldn't, "she needs her father to actually see her instead of just providing for her." The silence that fell between them felt like standing on a frozen lake, hearing the ice crack but not knowing which direction to run. Marcus took 3 steps toward her, close enough that she could smell his cologne, something expensive and woody that probably had some ridiculous name like Conquest or Empire. "You've worked here 3 weeks," he said softly, and somehow that soft tone was more threatening than shouting. "And you presume to lecture me on fatherhood. My wife died giving birth to our 2nd child. That child died with her. I have spent every day of the past 2 years building an empire to ensure Emma never wants for anything. Don't stand in my house, collecting a paycheck I provide, and tell me I don't see my daughter." Keisha felt like she'd been slapped, but she also saw something flicker behind his eyes, something that looked suspiciously like grief, wearing anger's clothes. "I'm sorry for your loss," she said quietly, and meant it. "But money isn't the same as presence. And Emma, she needs—" The sound of small feet padding across marble cut her off. Emma appeared in the doorway to the library, her dark curls wild around her face, wearing pajamas at 3 in the afternoon, her light brown skin pale in a way that Keisha now understood wasn't just about being tired. The girl looked at her father with eyes that held too much knowledge for 6 years old. "Daddy," Emma said, her voice small. "I don't feel good." Marcus's entire demeanor shifted in a heartbeat, that cold CEO exterior cracking to show something raw underneath. He crossed to his daughter in 3 long strides, kneeling so he was eye level with her, his hand automatically reaching to feel her forehead. "What's wrong, sweetheart? Is it your stomach again? Should I call Dr. Morrison?" "My arms hurt," Emma whispered, and Keisha saw the girl's hands trembling. "And I'm tired all the time. Miss Rebecca used to give me medicine that made it better, but she left, and she didn't say where the medicine was." The world seemed to tilt sideways. Rebecca. The previous nanny. The one who'd left so suddenly that Marcus had been scrambling to find a replacement. The one whose room Keisha now occupied. The one whose hidden documents were currently leaving sweat marks on Keisha's back. Marcus looked up at Keisha, and for the first time since she'd met him, she saw fear in his eyes, naked and undisguised. "What medicine?" he demanded. "Emma doesn't take any medication. She's perfectly healthy except for occasional stomach bugs." Emma's lower lip trembled. "Miss Rebecca said it was our special secret. She said if I told you, you'd be angry and send me away like you sent Mommy away." "Emma's sweetheart, Mommy died. She didn't—" Marcus's voice cracked, and he pulled his daughter close, and Keisha watched this powerful man's hands shake as he held the small body that suddenly seemed far too fragile. "I would never send you away. You're everything to me. Everything." "Mr. Ashford," Keisha heard herself say, her voice sounding distant even to her own ears. "I need to show you something." She pulled the papers from behind her back, walked over to where father and daughter huddled on the marble floor that probably cost more per square foot than most people's monthly rent, and handed him the blood test results. She watched his face as he read, watched the color drain from his tanned skin, watched his eyes move frantically across the page as if he could make the words rearrange themselves into something less devastating. "Where did you get this?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "In Rebecca's room, hidden inside a medical textbook behind the false bottom of her nightstand drawer." Keisha crouched down, meeting his eyes. "Mr. Ashford, I think your daughter is very sick, and I think your previous nanny knew about it. The question is, why didn't she tell you?" Marcus read the paper again, his jaw clenching and unclenching. "This says elevated creatine kinase levels. Muscle enzyme markers. This could indicate—" He couldn't finish the sentence. His hand found Emma's hair, stroking it with a gentleness that contradicted everything Keisha had seen of him until this moment. "How long have you not been feeling well, baby girl?" Emma's eyes filled with tears. "A long time, Daddy. Miss Rebecca said the doctors told her I was getting weaker, and that my muscles don't work right anymore, and that I only have—" She stopped, her child's voice stumbling over adult concepts. "That I only have a little bit of time left. She said 6 weeks. She said it 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks left." The words hung in the air like a death sentence, which is exactly what they were. Keisha felt her own tears burn behind her eyes as she watched Marcus's face contort, with an anguish so profound it felt wrong to witness it, like watching someone's soul tear in half. "No," he said firmly, standing abruptly with Emma in his arms. "No. We're going to the hospital. Now. Dr. Morrison is calling in every specialist in the country if needed. We're going to figure out what's happening and we're going to fix it." He looked at Keisha, and in that look was a desperate command. "You're coming with us. You found this. You're going to tell them everything you found." The drive to Manhattan Presbyterian Hospital passed in a blur of Marcus's frantic phone calls, and Emma's small body pressed against Keisha's side in the back of the Mercedes, the girl's thin fingers clutching Keisha's hand with surprising strength. "Are you going to leave like Miss Rebecca?" Emma asked quietly, her head resting against Keisha's shoulder. "Everyone leaves." "I'm not going anywhere," Keisha promised, stroking the child's wild curls, and realized she meant it with a fierceness that surprised her. 3 weeks ago, this had just been a job, a well-paying position that would help her clear her mother's medical debts. Now, sitting in the back of a luxury car racing toward answers that would probably break everyone involved, she realized she'd already fallen in love with this strange, sad little girl who'd been carrying the weight of her own death sentence without her father even knowing. The hospital's private wing smelled like antiseptic and money, that particular combination of medical efficiency and luxury that only the extremely wealthy ever experienced. Dr. Harrison Morrison met them in the corridor, his silver hair and expensive watch marking him as the kind of physician who treated senators and celebrities. His face shifted from professional politeness to genuine alarm as Marcus thrust the blood test results at him. "When were these done?" Dr. Morrison demanded, his eyes scanning the page with increasing concern. 8 weeks ago, apparently," Marcus ground out. "By someone. I don't know who. My daughter's nanny was hiding this from me. My daughter has been deteriorating for God knows how long, and I didn't know. I didn't know because I was too busy running a company while she was dying under my own roof." Dr. Morrison didn't waste time on platitudes. "Get her into examination room 3. I want a full workup now. Blood panel, muscle biopsy, genetic screening, everything." He looked at Emma with the practiced calm of someone who delivered bad news to too many families. "Emma, sweetheart, we're going to run some tests, okay? Some of them might be uncomfortable, but we need to figure out what's making you feel sick so we can help you feel better." Emma nodded solemnly, and Keisha marveled at the courage in that small gesture, at how this child had been living with terror and kept going tutoring and throwing books and trying to be normal when normal had been stolen from her by adults who should have protected her. "Can Keisha stay with me?" Emma asked, those big eyes finding Keisha's face. "I don't want to be alone." "I'll be right here," Keisha assured her, and caught Marcus looking at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Something between gratitude and resentment, as if he hated needing her, but couldn't deny that his daughter had already attached herself to this woman he barely knew. The next 6 hours were a special kind of hell. Keisha sat in examination rooms holding Emma's hand through blood draws and muscle biopsies, through the MRI that required the girl to stay perfectly still inside a machine that sounded like someone was demolishing a building, through the genetic counselor who asked questions about family history that made Marcus's face go gray. She watched him pace hospital corridors, his perfect suit becoming gradually more disheveled as he ran his hands through his hair, his phone ringing constantly with calls he ignored. At some point, his chief of operations called 5 times in a row, and Marcus finally answered with, "I don't care if the Tokyo deal falls through. I don't care if the entire company burns to the ground. My daughter is dying. That's all that matters," before hanging up and throwing his phone against the wall hard enough to shatter it. "Mr. Ashford," Keisha ventured during one of Emma's tests when they were alone in the waiting area, "do you have any idea why Rebecca would hide this from you?" Marcus slumped into one of those uncomfortable hospital chairs that somehow managed to cost a fortune while being designed for maximum misery. "I don't know. I paid her extremely well. She had full authority to seek medical care for Emma whenever needed. I trusted her completely." He laughed bitterly. "My wife died, and I couldn't handle being a single father and running a company, so I hired someone to be Emma's mother in all but name. I gave Rebecca everything, access to all of Emma's needs, and apparently she used that access to let my daughter die in secret." "The note on the test results said something about money," Keisha said carefully. "It said, 'Too much money at stake.'" Marcus's head snapped up. "What?" "There was a handwritten note. He can't know. Too much money at stake. I think someone was being paid to keep this quiet." She watched the realization dawn on his face, watched it transform his grief into something harder and more dangerous. "Mr. Ashford, who benefits if Emma dies?" The question sat between them like a bomb, and Keisha could practically see Marcus's brilliant mind putting pieces together, that same razor-sharp intelligence that had built a tech empire now turning inward to examine the architecture of betrayal in his own life. "My wife's family," he said slowly. Victoria's parents. When she died, the prenuptial agreement specified that her trust fund would go to Emma. $50 million, held in trust until Emma turns 25. But if Emma dies before reaching adulthood, he stopped, his face going white. If Emma dies, the money reverts to Victoria's parents. They've been struggling financially. Victoria's father made some bad investments. They've been calling me, asking for loans, for early access to the trust. I refused every time. Mr. Ashford, Dr. Morrison's voice cut through the waiting room, and something in his tone made Keisha's stomach drop. Marcus was on his feet instantly, and Keisha followed as they were led into a private consultation room that felt too much like an execution chamber, all neutral colors and soft lighting designed to cushion devastating blows. Emma was already there, curled up in a chair that dwarfed her small frame, clutching a teddy bear someone had given her. Emma wanted to hear this, Dr. Morrison explained. She's remarkably brave for her age. She said she's tired of adults keeping secrets. Tell me everything, Marcus said, sitting down next to his daughter and pulling her into his lap. Keisha found herself standing behind them, her hand somehow finding Emma's shoulder, forming a protective triangle against whatever was coming. Dr. Morrison pulled up scans on a computer screen, images of muscles and nerves that looked wrong even to Keisha's untrained eye. Emma has Duchenne muscular dystrophy. It's a genetic condition that causes progressive muscle degeneration. What's unusual is that it almost exclusively affects males. Girls can be carriers, but they rarely show symptoms because they have two X chromosomes, and the working copy usually compensates. For Emma to be symptomatic means she has an extremely rare genetic variation. What does that mean? Marcus asked, his voice tight. Can it be treated? Cured? There's no cure, Dr. Morrison said gently. But there are treatments that can slow progression, manage symptoms, improve quality of life. Gene therapy is showing promise in clinical trials. The problem is, he paused, choosing his words carefully. The problem is that Emma's disease has progressed significantly without intervention. If she'd been diagnosed when symptoms first appeared, which based on her history was probably around age 4, we could have started treatments that might have given her years, possibly decades. As it stands now, with the advanced deterioration we're seeing. He stopped, looking at Emma, clearly struggling with how much to say in front of the child. I want to know, Emma said quietly. It's my body. I want to know. Dr. Morrison nodded, a sad smile touching his face. You're right. It is your body, and you deserve the truth. Emma, your muscles are very weak. Your heart is a muscle, and it's not working as well as it should. Your lungs, the muscles that help you breathe, they're getting weaker too. If we had caught this earlier, we could have done more to help. Right now, we can start treatments that will make you more comfortable and possibly slow things down. But, he looked at Marcus, and Keisha saw the doctor's professional mask slip to show genuine sorrow. But realistically, we're looking at months, not years. And that's with aggressive intervention. Without treatment, which she hasn't been receiving. 6 weeks, Emma finished for him. Miss Rebecca said 6 weeks. Who told her that? Marcus's voice was deadly calm, the kind of calm that came before volcanic eruptions. Who gave her that prognosis? Because someone did. Someone tested my daughter, diagnosed her with a terminal illness, and instead of telling me, gave that information to my employee with instructions to keep me in the dark while my daughter died. Dr. Morrison frowned, pulling up the lab results again. These tests weren't run at this hospital. The letterhead is from Westchester Medical Associates. That's a private practice, very exclusive. Dr. Richard Sterling's clinic. He paused, and Keisha saw recognition flash across his face. Sterling specializes in genetic disorders. He's one of the best in the field. He's also... Another pause, this one heavier. He's also married to Victoria Ashford's sister. Your sister-in-law. The room felt like all the oxygen had been sucked out of it. Marcus stood up so abruptly that Emma almost fell, but he caught her, settling her back in the chair with shaking hands before turning to face the wall, his shoulders rigid with fury. "Catherine," he said, the name sounding like a curse. "Catherine Sterling, Victoria's older sister. The woman who told me at my wife's funeral that I was responsible for Victoria's death because I'd gotten her pregnant again too soon. The woman who called me a selfish bastard, who only cared about having an heir." He spun around, and Keisha had never seen such rage on a human face. "She did this. She convinced Rebecca to hide Emma's illness from me. She probably paid her, and she sat in my house during the holidays, held my daughter, looked me in the eye and said nothing while Emma was dying. We need to call the police," Keisha said, finding her voice. "This is God. This is attempted murder. She withheld life-saving medical information from a child. She conspired to—" "No," Marcus interrupted, his voice cold and calculated now, the fury transforming into something more dangerous, that CEO brain kicking into strategic mode. "We need proof. We need Rebecca to testify about who paid her and why. We need documentation of every conversation, every payment, every instruction. Catherine is smart and well-connected. If we go to the police without an airtight case, she'll have expensive lawyers shredded in hours. Her husband will claim doctor-patient confidentiality, that Rebecca brought Emma to him without my knowledge, that he had no reason to suspect anything improper." He pulled out his shattered phone, realized it was broken, and held out his hand to Keisha. "Let me use your phone. I'm calling my head of security. We're going to find Rebecca and she's going to tell us everything." Keisha handed over her phone, watching as Marcus made 3 calls in rapid succession, each one clipped and efficient, activating what sounded like a private intelligence network. When he finished, he crouched in front of Emma again, cupping her small face in his large hands. "Baby girl, I am so sorry. I'm sorry I didn't see what was happening. I'm sorry I was so busy making money that I missed the fact that you were sick. I'm sorry that people I trusted hurt you. But I promise you, I swear to you on everything I am, we're going to fix this. You're going to get the best treatment in the world, and the people who did this to you are going to pay for every single moment of pain they've caused." Emma threw her thin arms around his neck, and Keisha watched this man who'd seemed made of ice and ambition crumble, his shoulders shaking as he buried his face in his daughter's hair. "I don't want them to pay, Daddy," Emma whispered. "I just don't want to die. I'm only 6. I haven't even learned to ride a bike without training wheels yet. I haven't been to the ocean. I want to grow up. I want to be a veterinarian and have dogs and maybe a horse. I want to be tall like you. I don't want to die." "You're not going to die," Marcus said fiercely, though his eyes when they met Keisha's over Emma's shoulder told a different story, one written in terror and desperation, and the awful knowledge that sometimes fathers can't save their daughters no matter how much money they have. "You're going to have every single one of those things. The ocean, dogs, horses, all of it." Dr. Morrison cleared his throat. "We should admit Emma tonight. Start her on corticosteroids to help with the inflammation. Begin respiratory therapy. Get physical therapy scheduled. The next few days are crucial for stabilizing her condition. And Mr. Ashford, I need to be honest with you. You're going to want to consider quality of life issues moving forward. We can do things to extend time, but some of those interventions are painful and frightening for a child. You'll need to make some difficult decisions about what Emma's remaining time looks like." "Her remaining time," Marcus repeated, the words sounding foreign in his mouth, "is going to be as long as humanly possible, and as happy as I can make it. Money is no object. If there's an experimental treatment in Japan, we're going to Japan. If there's a clinical trial in Switzerland, we're going to Switzerland. If there's a prayer circle in Kansas that might help, I'll build them a cathedral, whatever it takes. And there, in that sterile hospital room with its beeping machines and antiseptic smell, Keisha saw both the best and worst of Marcus Ashford laid bare, the man who thought money could solve anything coming face to face with the one problem it couldn't fix, and refusing to accept reality with a stubbornness that was either admirable or tragic. She couldn't decide which. "Mr. Ashford," she said gently, "I think what Emma needs most right now is you. Not your money or your connections. Just you." He looked at her and she saw something shift behind his eyes, some recognition of truth in her words that he didn't want to acknowledge but couldn't ignore. Then she'll have me, he said simply. From now on, she'll have me. Emma was admitted to the pediatric wing in a private suite that looked more like a hotel room than a hospital, complete with a parent's bedroom attached so Marcus could stay overnight. Keisha expected to be dismissed, her role complete now that the truth was out, but when she started to say goodbye, Emma's hand shot out and grabbed hers with surprising strength. "Don't leave," the girl pleaded. "Please. You're the only one who tells me the truth. Everyone else is always trying to protect me or hide things from me. I need someone who treats me like I'm real." Keisha looked at Marcus, who nodded once, a gesture that felt like surrender and permission wrapped together. So she stayed, settling into the chair beside Emma's bed while Marcus made more calls from the attached bedroom, his voice carrying through the door, talking to lawyers and investigators and medical specialists around the world. Nurses came and went, administering medications, checking vitals, treating Emma with a gentle efficiency that spoke of too much experience with dying children. And through it all, Emma held Keisha's hand, her small fingers surprisingly warm, her breathing gradually evening out as the steroids and pain medication took effect. "Keisha," Emma said drowsily, her eyes already half closed. "Do you think Mommy knew I was going to be sick? Is that why she died? So she wouldn't have to watch me die too?" The question hit Keisha like a physical blow. "Oh, sweetheart, no. Your mommy didn't choose to leave you. Sometimes terrible things just happen, and it's not anybody's fault. But I bet wherever she is, she's watching over you, and she's so proud of how brave you are." "Miss Rebecca used to say that Daddy didn't care about me," Emma continued, her words starting to slur as sleep pulled at her. "She said he only cared about his company and his money, and that if I died, he'd just be sad for a little while, and then get a new daughter. But that's not true, is it? I saw his face today. He looked like his heart was breaking." "It was breaking," Keisha confirmed, brushing hair off Emma's forehead. "Your daddy loves you more than anything in this world. He just forgot how to show it for a while because he was hurting so much from losing your mommy. But he's here now, and he's going to fight for you with everything he has." "Good," Emma whispered, her eyes finally closing completely. "Because I'm going to fight too. Even if I only have 6 weeks, 3 weeks now, I'm going to fight." Keisha sat there long after Emma fell asleep, watching the gentle rise and fall of the girl's chest, counting each breath like a blessing. Marcus appeared in the doorway, his tie gone now, his shirt unbuttoned at the collar, looking more human than she'd ever seen him. "My security team found Rebecca," he said quietly. "She's in Vermont. She agreed to talk in exchange for immunity from prosecution. She's meeting with my lawyers and a prosecutor tomorrow morning." "What did she say?" Keisha asked, though part of her wasn't sure she wanted to know. Marcus came into the room, moving to stand on the other side of Emma's bed, looking down at his daughter with an expression of such profound love and loss that Keisha had to look away from the intimacy of it. "Catherine approached her 6 months after Victoria died. Offered her $100,000 to make sure I never found out if Emma got sick. Rebecca claimed she didn't think anything would actually happen, that it was just Catherine being paranoid and vindictive, so she took the money. Then Emma started showing symptoms: muscle weakness, falling down, getting tired easily. Rebecca took her to Dr. Sterling, Catherine's husband, who ran tests and diagnosed the Duchenne. He told Rebecca that the disease was terminal and that telling me would only cause suffering, that it would be kinder to let Emma's final months be peaceful rather than subjecting her to experimental treatments and false hope." "That's insane," Keisha breathed. "That's not his call to make." "No," Marcus agreed, his jaw tight. "But he convinced Rebecca that he was being merciful. That I would throw money at the problem and turn Emma into a medical experiment. That the best thing for Emma was to let her fade quietly, making her comfortable while keeping her away from hospitals and invasive procedures. Rebecca claims she thought she was protecting Emma from me. While collecting $100,000, Keisha pointed out. "While collecting $100,000, Marcus confirmed. She also says Catherine called her weekly to check on Emma's condition, to ask about symptoms, about how long Rebecca thought Emma had left. Catherine was monitoring my daughter's decline like someone tracking a stock portfolio." His hands clenched on the bed rail. I built a company worth $3 billion. I can buy almost anything in this world, but I can't buy time. I can't buy my daughter's health. And I can't undo the months that were stolen from us because someone valued $50 million more than a child's life. What happens now? Keisha asked, looking between father and daughter, these two people who'd been living in the same house while dying in different ways. With Catherine, with the legal case, with everything. Marcus reached out and gently adjusted Emma's blanket, a gesture so tender it made Keisha's chest ache. Catherine and her husband are going to be arrested tomorrow morning. Securities fraud, conspiracy to commit murder, child endangerment, medical malpractice, half a dozen other charges my lawyers are putting together. They'll claim innocence, obviously. They'll say Rebecca misunderstood, that Dr. Sterling was just providing a medical opinion, that Catherine's payments were for childcare services. It'll be a legal battle that takes years. He finally looked up at Keisha. But here's what they don't understand. I don't need to win in court. I need to win in the world. By tomorrow afternoon, every news outlet in the country will know what they did. By tomorrow evening, Dr. Sterling will be unemployable, and Catherine will be a social pariah. By next week, I'll have destroyed every business investment they have, called in every favor they've ever asked for, and made sure that for the rest of their lives, people cross the street to avoid them. Marcus's voice was cold steel, and Keisha saw the billionaire CEO who'd built an empire through ruthlessness. But now that power was focused on protection rather than profit, on justice rather than conquest. That won't save Emma, Keisha said softly, bringing him back from the edge of vengeance to what actually mattered, to the little girl sleeping in the hospital bed between them, her chest rising and falling with mechanical assistance, her small body fighting a battle it could never win. No, Marcus admitted, and his voice finally broke, that controlled facade crumbling completely like a dam giving way under too much pressure. Nothing will save Emma. 3 weeks. Maybe 6 if we're lucky. Maybe 3 months if we get a miracle. Dr. Morrison was clear. The damage is too extensive. We can make her comfortable. We can give her some good days. But we can't stop what's happening to her. He sank into the chair beside Emma's hospital bed, his head in his hands. This man who'd thought money could solve anything finally understanding that some problems don't have solutions, only choices about how to face them. I missed 2 years of her life while I was building an empire for her to inherit, and now she won't live long enough to inherit it. Everything I worked for, everything I sacrificed, it was all supposed to be for her. And instead, I gave her to strangers who let her die. Keisha reached across the bed and did something that 3 weeks ago would have been unthinkable. Something that crossed every boundary between employer and employee, between billionaire and housekeeper, between two people from completely different worlds. She took Marcus Ashford's hand, this powerful man who terrified everyone around him, and held it while he cried silently, his shoulders shaking with grief, too large for his body to contain. "You're here now," she said firmly, squeezing his fingers. "That's what matters. You found out, and you're here, and you're going to make sure her remaining time is filled with love. That's all any of us can do. Love people while we have them, as fiercely as possible, and hope it's enough to carry them through whatever comes next." They sat like that for a long time. Two people on opposite sides of a dying child's bed, holding hands across the divide of money and power in completely different worlds, united by the simple, terrible truth that sometimes love isn't enough, but it's all we have. Outside, Manhattan glittered with lights and life and a million people going about their evening routines, completely unaware that in this hospital room, a billionaire was learning that some things can't be bought, and a housekeeper was learning that beneath all that money and power, grief is grief, and fear is fear. And we're all just fragile humans trying not to break. The next morning arrived with the kind of chaos that only happens when powerful people go to war and the media smells blood in the water. Marcus's lawyers had worked through the night, and by dawn, Catherine and Richard Sterling were arrested at their home in Westchester. Their shocked faces broadcast across every news network as they were led away in handcuffs. The story broke everywhere. Wealthy family conspiracy to murder child for inheritance money. The kind of headline that made people stop scrolling and actually read. Keisha watched Marcus field calls from reporters, prosecutors, and outraged medical boards, all while sitting beside Emma's bed, refusing to leave her side even as his world exploded around him, even as his phone rang constantly with demands for statements and interviews and reactions. Emma woke slowly, her small face peaceful despite the oxygen cannula in her nose and the IV line in her hand, and all the machinery keeping her body functioning when it wanted to shut down. "Daddy," she whispered, her voice thin as paper. "I had a dream about Mommy. She was in a garden with flowers bigger than houses, and she told me not to be scared of anything. She said being scared just wastes time when you could be doing something fun instead." Marcus lifted her carefully, mindful of all the tubes and wires, cradling her against his chest like she was made of glass and might shatter at any moment. "You don't have to be scared, baby girl. I'm right here, and I'm not going anywhere. And whatever happens, we're going to face it together. You, me, and Keisha. We're a team now." "I made a list," Emma said, her voice gaining a little strength, that spark of personality pushing through the weakness. "Of things I want to do before I can't do things anymore. Keisha helped me think of them yesterday while you were talking to the doctors." She looked at Keisha with those two wise eyes that had seen too much pain for 6 years old. "I want to see the ocean, because I've never seen anything bigger than the swimming pool at the club. I want to pet a horse, because they're beautiful and soft. I want to have ice cream for breakfast because Miss Rebecca never let me have sugar before noon. I want to have a birthday party even though my birthday isn't for 3 months because I might not make it that long. I want to plant a garden so something grows even after I'm gone. I want to paint something really big, bigger than me, so people remember I was here." Marcus's whole body shook, but he kept his voice steady, kept his face calm for his daughter even though Keisha could see him dying inside with every word Emma spoke. "Then we do all of it," he said, pulling out his phone with shaking hands. "Every single thing on your list, we make it happen. Dr. Morrison said you can leave the hospital in a few days once we stabilize your medications and get your oxygen situation figured out. And then we bring the world to you, sweetheart. Whatever you want, however impossible it seems, we find a way." Over the next week, Marcus Ashford became a different man, the transformation so complete that people who'd known him for years barely recognized him. He hired round-the-clock medical staff, nurses and respiratory therapists, who knew how to keep a dying child comfortable and safe. He converted the estate's main living room into what he called Emma's Adventure Center, a hospital bed disguised as a princess canopy surrounded by everything a child could want. He hired an art teacher who set up a massive canvas, 10 feet wide, and together Emma and Marcus spent hours painting a garden scene with flowers in impossible colors, purple roses and blue daisies and orange tulips that existed nowhere in nature but everywhere in Emma's imagination. When Emma's arms got too tired to hold the brush, Marcus would hold her hand and move with her, both of them painting together, creating something beautiful out of the time they had left. The horse was easier than expected. Marcus found a therapeutic riding program with a gentle giant named Moonlight, who'd been trained to work with sick children, and they brought him to the estate's backyard. Keisha took 100 photos of Emma's face when she touched the animal's soft nose, pure wonder lighting up her features, making her look healthy and whole for just a moment, making it possible to forget that she was dying, and just see a little girl meeting her favorite animal for the first time. Marcus lifted Emma onto Moonlight's back, holding her steady while the horse walked in slow circles, and Emma spread her thin arms wide and declared she was flying. And maybe she was. Maybe that's what those last beautiful moments are, a kind of flight before the final landing. The ocean was harder. Emma's breathing was already compromised, her lung muscles weakening by the day, and Dr. Morrison warned that the trip might be dangerous, that the stress of travel could accelerate her decline. But Marcus looked at his daughter's face, at the hope shining in her eyes, and said they were going anyway because what was the point of extending life if you weren't actually living? He rented a beach house in the Hamptons, arranged for a medical helicopter equipped with everything Emma might need, hired a critical care team to fly with them, and 3 days later they were standing on white sand with the Atlantic stretching endlessly before them. Water meeting sky in a line so perfect it looked drawn by some cosmic artist. Emma couldn't walk on her own anymore, her leg muscles too weak to support her weight. So Marcus carried her to the water's edge, wading in with his expensive shoes soaked and his designer pants ruined, and not caring even a little bit because his daughter was laughing. He lowered her carefully so her toes could touch the waves, and she gasped at the temperature, at the power of the water pushing and pulling, at the vastness of it all. "It's cold and warm at the same time," she said, wonder in her voice. "How is that possible, Daddy? How can something be two things at once?" "Magic," Keisha answered, standing beside them in the surf, her own shoes abandoned on the beach, her hand resting on Emma's back. "The world is full of impossible things that happen anyway, like how you can be scared and brave at the same time, or how you can be sad and happy in the same moment, or how you can lose someone and still feel them with you." They built sandcastles, or rather Marcus built them while Emma directed the architecture, her voice getting weaker as the afternoon wore on, but her imagination staying strong. They collected shells, smooth white ones and spiraled orange ones, and pieces of blue glass worn soft by the tide, and Emma declared they were treasures worth more than diamonds, because they came from the ocean, and the ocean was magic. They watched the sunset paint the sky in colors that didn't have names, and Emma tried to describe them, giving up and just calling them feelings instead of colors, saying the pink was happiness, and the orange was excitement, and the purple was the sad kind of beautiful that makes you cry even though you're smiling. That night, Emma fell asleep in her father's arms with the sound of waves as her lullaby, and Keisha saw Marcus's face in the moonlight, memorizing every detail of his daughter's features, as if he could hold on to her through sheer force of observation, as if looking hard enough could make her stay. They sat on the beach for hours after Emma slept, neither of them willing to go inside and end this perfect day, both of them knowing that perfect days were numbered now, that each one might be the last. Back at the estate 2 days later, they threw Emma the birthday party she'd requested. Marcus invited children from the hospital ward, kids who understood what it meant to be sick, who didn't ask awkward questions about Emma's wheelchair or her breathing tube or why she looked so tired all the time. They came with their parents, with their own IV poles and medical equipment, with their bald heads from chemotherapy and their too thin bodies from treatments, and they played gentle games adapted for children who couldn't run or jump, but could still laugh. They had a treasure hunt where the clues were riddles Emma had written, leading to prizes hidden around the garden. They sang Happy Birthday with fierce joy, voices overlapping and off-key and absolutely perfect, and Emma wore a crown that Marcus had commissioned from a jeweler, real silver and tiny diamonds, because why not give a dying girl something precious? Why not make her feel like royalty in her final days? When she blew out 6 candles, one for each year of life, Emma made her wish out loud instead of keeping it secret. "I wish," she said clearly, her voice carrying across the party, "that everyone remembers me as happy, not sad. I wish that when people think about me after I'm gone, they smile instead of cry. I wish that my garden keeps growing and that Daddy doesn't forget to water it. And I wish that everyone here, all my friends who are sick like me, that they get better and get to grow up and do all the things I won't get to do." Keisha watched grown adults openly weep at the courage of this tiny person facing death with more grace than most people showed facing ordinary life. She watched Marcus's face contort with the effort of not breaking down completely, of staying strong for his daughter even though his heart was being ripped out of his chest. She watched the other children, some younger than Emma, some older, all of them understanding on some level that they were witnessing something profound, that this party was both celebration and goodbye. The days that followed the birthday party took on a dreamlike quality, as if time itself was bending, stretching to hold as much life as possible before the inevitable end. Marcus stopped going to the office entirely, appointing his chief operating officer as interim CEO and making it clear that he didn't care what happened to the company, that his only job now was being Emma's father. He carried her everywhere because walking had become impossible, her leg muscles too weak to support even her slight weight. He read to her for hours, creating voices for characters that made her giggle even when laughing hurt. He played simple games with her, adapting the rules so she could participate despite her limitations. He learned to braid her wild curls, fumbling at first but eventually creating elaborate styles that made Emma feel like a princess. Keisha watched this transformation with a mixture of joy and heartbreak. She saw Marcus discover fatherhood just as Emma was leaving, saw him finally become the parent his daughter had always needed, but had been denied for most of her short life. She helped where she could, reading to Emma when Marcus needed to step away and cry, singing songs when the pain got bad and medication took too long to work, holding Emma's hand during physical therapy sessions that were more about comfort than improvement, since improvement was no longer possible. The three of them formed a unit, a makeshift family bound by love and loss, and the shared understanding that every moment was borrowed time. They continued checking items off Emma's list, adapting activities as her condition worsened. The garden was planted, but Emma could no longer tend it, so Marcus and Keisha would carry her outside in the mornings, positioning her chair so she could watch them water and weed, directing their efforts like a tiny foreman overseeing a construction site. The massive painting was completed, but Emma's arms were too weak to hold a brush, so she would tell Marcus what colors to use where, creating art through verbal direction, her imagination still vibrant even as her body failed. They watched movies together. Emma nestled between Marcus and Keisha on the enormous couch, choosing animated films with happy endings, because sad movies felt redundant when life itself was providing enough tragedy. Catherine Sterling's trial began during this time, broadcast live on news networks, but Marcus refused to watch it. "She's already taken too much from us," he told Keisha one evening while Emma slept, her breathing raspy and labored, even with supplemental oxygen. "I won't give her the satisfaction of taking our focus too. These days with Emma, these are what matter. Not revenge, not justice, just love. That's all we have left to give her." Keisha understood, and she made sure that news of the trial never reached the living room where Emma spent her days, that the girl's final weeks weren't tainted by the ugliness of the conspiracy that had stolen time from her. Dr. Morrison visited the house twice a week, monitoring Emma's decline with professional detachment that barely masked his personal grief. He'd been practicing medicine for 30 years and had seen too many children die, but something about Emma got to him. Maybe her courage or her sweetness or just the sheer injustice of a child being allowed to deteriorate because adults valued money over life. He pulled Marcus aside during one visit, his expression grave, and explained what the final days would look like. Respiratory failure, cardiac arrest, possibly both. She'd drift in and out of consciousness, might experience confusion or hallucinations. The end, when it came, would likely be peaceful if they managed her pain correctly, but the journey there would be hard to watch. Marcus listened with a stone face, nodded once, and then went back to Emma's side, determined not to waste a single conscious moment she had left. But even miracles have limits, and fairy tales eventually end. 2 weeks after the birthday party, 3 weeks after leaving the hospital, Emma's breathing worsened dramatically. Her oxygen levels dropped despite the machines pumping air into her failing lungs. Her heart, that vital muscle, was weakening too, struggling to pump blood through her body. Dr. Morrison came to the house, examined her with gentle hands that had touched too many dying children, and pulled Marcus aside for a conversation that left him gray-faced and trembling, aged 20 years and 20 minutes. That evening, Marcus carried Emma out to the garden they'd planted together, seeds just beginning to sprout into tiny green shoots that promised flowers to come. He sat on a bench with her in his lap, Keisha beside them, and the three of them watched fireflies dance in the growing darkness, little lights blinking on and off like Morse code messages from the universe. "Daddy," Emma said, her voice barely audible over the crickets and the distant sound of traffic, "I'm getting really tired. Not sleepy tired, the other kind, the kind where you just want to stop trying so hard." "I know, sweetheart." Marcus's voice was steady, but Keisha saw his hands shaking as he held his daughter, saw the tears streaming down his face that he didn't bother to hide anymore. "I don't want to be scared anymore," Emma continued, each word an effort, her lungs working so hard for so little oxygen. "I don't want to hurt anymore. Everything hurts now, even with the medicine. Even when I'm just lying still. It feels like my whole body is tired of being a body." Her small hand found his, fingers thin as twigs, grip weak but determined. "Is it okay if I stop fighting? Is it okay if I just let go?" Keisha felt her heart shatter into pieces so small they could never be reassembled as Marcus pulled his daughter closer, his whole body trembling with the force of his grief. "You've been so brave, Emma," he said, his voice breaking on her name. So brave. Braver than anyone I've ever known. You fought so hard and you've done everything right. And if you're tired, if you're ready, then yes, baby girl. It's okay to stop. Mommy's waiting for you on the other side, and she's going to take care of you and you won't hurt anymore. You'll be free. Will you be okay? Emma asked, turning her head to look up at him, her eyes enormous in her too thin face. Will you be sad forever? I'll be devastated, Marcus said honestly, because Emma had asked for truth and he would give it to her even when it hurt. Losing you will be the worst thing that ever happens to me. It will break me in ways I don't know if I can heal from. But I'll survive because you taught me how to live again. You gave me these weeks, these perfect weeks, and I'll carry them forever. Every moment, every laugh, every painting, every wave on the beach. I'll remember all of it, and it will hurt, and it will be beautiful at the same time. Emma turned to Keisha, that small face so serious, so impossibly mature. Will you make sure Daddy doesn't forget to be happy sometimes? He's really bad at that. He gets all focused on work and being serious, and he forgets that life is supposed to have fun parts too. Promise me you'll remind him. Keisha couldn't speak around the lump in her throat, couldn't force words past the grief choking her. So she just nodded and held Emma's other hand. This child who'd become like family in such a short time. This girl who'd taught her what really mattered in life. That night, they moved Emma to her princess bed in the living room, the one surrounded by all her art, and her treasures from the beach and photos from the birthday party. Marcus lay beside her, taking up most of the bed, not caring about the medical equipment or the proper procedures, just wanting to be close to his daughter. Keisha stayed in a chair close enough to touch, close enough to be part of this final vigil. They told Emma stories about her mother, about Victoria and how they'd met, how she'd laughed at Marcus's terrible jokes, how she'd wanted children more than anything, how she would have loved Emma so much, how she was watching from wherever people go when they die, proud and waiting. They sang lullabies, Marcus's voice rough and Keisha's smooth, harmonizing imperfectly in a way that was better than perfect. They promised that Emma would never be forgotten, that her garden would bloom every spring, that they'd see the ocean every year on this date and throw flowers into the waves for her, that her paintings would hang in the house forever, that her story would be told to help other children. As midnight approached, Emma's breathing changed, becoming shallower, more labored, each inhale a mountain she had to climb. The nurse checked her vitals and met Marcus's eyes, a small shake of her head confirming what they all knew. This was it. The end they'd been racing toward since Keisha found those papers 5 weeks ago. Daddy, Emma whispered, her eyes half closed, her voice dreamy and distant. I see Mommy. She's here in the room with us. She's so pretty and she's smiling, and she says it's time to go. She says she's been waiting for me, and she's going to show me everything, all the places I wanted to see. We're going to see them together in heaven where bodies don't get tired and hurt. Then you go to her, baby girl, Marcus said, his voice steady even though his face was wet with tears. Even though his hands were shaking so hard, Keisha could see them trembling. You go be with Mommy. We'll be okay. We'll miss you every single day. But we'll be okay because you taught us how. You taught us that life is short and precious and we have to grab every moment. You go to Mommy now. You rest. I love you, Daddy, Emma breathed, each word slower than the last, her voice fading like a radio losing signal. I love you, Keisha. Thank you for finding the papers. Thank you for telling Daddy the truth. Thank you for the best 5 weeks of my whole life. Thank you for making me feel special. You are special, Keisha managed, tears streaming down her face. You're the most special person I've ever known. Emma smiled, a small, peaceful curve of her lips, and then her eyes closed one final time. Her breathing slowed, stuttered, stopped. The machines began to alarm, but the nurse silenced them quickly, and suddenly the room was quiet, except for the sound of Marcus's grief. A sound that came from somewhere so deep it seemed to shake the foundations of the house. He held his daughter's body and rocked back and forth, keening like a wounded animal, and Keisha wrapped her arms around both of them, this broken family saying goodbye to the peace that had brought them together. Emma Ashford died at 12:47 in the morning on a Thursday in July, 6 years and 3 months old, surrounded by love in a room that smelled of flowers and hope, and the particular antiseptic scent of medical equipment. She slipped away peacefully. Her face relaxed in death in a way it hadn't been in life. Finally free from pain. Finally able to rest. The funeral 3 days later was attended by hundreds of people, far more than Marcus had expected. He spoke at the service, his voice steady despite the devastation in his eyes, and told everyone that Emma had taught him what really mattered in life. Not money, not power, not empires or legacies. Just presence. Just love. Just making every moment count because you never know which moment will be your last. 6 months after Emma died, Marcus established the Emma Ashford Foundation with Keisha as its executive director. He put $1 billion into it to start, money that would have been Emma's inheritance, using it instead to ensure other children had better endings than his daughter. They funded research for Duchenne muscular dystrophy, creating partnerships with leading universities and research hospitals. They established early screening programs in pediatric clinics across the country, ensuring that children showing symptoms would be diagnosed quickly before irreversible damage occurred. They provided hospice support for families facing the loss of a child, sending counselors and medical equipment and financial assistance to homes where parents were watching their children die. They created scholarship programs for children who survived terminal diagnoses, helping them pursue education and dreams that Emma would never have. They told Emma's story at medical conferences, using her death and the conspiracy that had hastened it to advocate for better oversight of pediatric care, for systems that would prevent nannies and relatives from hiding medical information from parents. The foundation's first year was brutally hard. Marcus threw himself into the work with an intensity that worried Keisha, spending 18-hour days reviewing grant applications and meeting with researchers and visiting hospitals where children were fighting the same battle Emma had lost. She understood it was his way of processing grief, of transforming the unbearable pain of loss into something productive. But she worried he was running from his feelings, rather than through them. She made sure he ate, made sure he slept at least a few hours each night, made sure he attended the grief counseling sessions she'd insisted they both participate in. Slowly, over months, she watched him begin to heal. Not moving past the loss because you never really move past losing a child, but learning to carry it, to integrate Emma's death into his identity in a way that didn't consume him entirely. They worked side by side, this unlikely partnership between a billionaire tech CEO and a former housekeeper. And gradually they became friends, real friends, bonded by shared tragedy and shared purpose. They had coffee every morning in Marcus's office at the foundation headquarters, discussing strategy and funding priorities. They visited hospitals together, meeting families in crisis, offering support and resources. They spoke at fundraisers, telling Emma's story over and over, never letting people forget the little girl whose death had sparked this movement. And sometimes, late at night when the work was done, they would talk about Emma not as a cause or a catalyst, but as a person, sharing memories of her laugh and her bravery and her terrible jokes that made them smile through tears. The garden at the Ashford estate bloomed that spring, exactly as Emma had imagined. Wildflowers in riotous colors, butterflies and bees, beauty growing from seeds planted by small hands that would never see the harvest. Marcus had a bench installed with a plaque that read, "Emma's Garden, where love blooms forever." He sat there often, sometimes with Keisha, sometimes alone, talking to his daughter as if she could still hear him. 1 year after Emma's death, on what would have been her 7th birthday, Marcus and Keisha stood in that garden together. "Do you think she knows?" Marcus asked quietly. "That we kept our promise? That we're remembering her happy?" Keisha watched a butterfly land on a sunflower, impossibly delicate, and somehow perfect. "I think if there's any way for her to see us, she's proud. Not because we're saving lives or running foundations, but because we're here, together, still choosing to live instead of just survive. Because we took the lesson she taught us, and we're applying it. That's what she'd want." Marcus nodded, and for the first time since Emma died, Keisha saw something other than grief on his face. Not happiness, but maybe hope. The understanding that life continues even after the worst loss, that love doesn't end with death, but transforms into something that carries us forward. "She changed everything," he said, That's her legacy. Not the tragedy, but the transformation. They stood in silence, surrounded by flowers that bloomed, because a 6-year-old girl had dreamed them, because love had planted them, because even in endings there are beginnings if you're brave enough to look. Emma Ashford had lived 6 years and had 5 perfect weeks at the end. 5 weeks where she was loved completely, seen fully, treasured absolutely. And in those 5 weeks, she'd taken a grief-stricken father and taught him presence, taken a compassionate housekeeper and given her purpose, taken 2 strangers and made them family. The foundation would save countless children. The garden would bloom for decades. And every year, Marcus and Keisha would return to that beach, throw flowers into the Atlantic, and remember a little girl who faced death with courage and left the world better for her brief time in it. That was Emma's legacy. Not that she died, but how she lived. Not the tragedy, but the love. Not the ending, but everything that came before it. She'd had 6 years when she deserved 60, but she'd made those 6 years matter. And that, they agreed, watching butterflies dance among flowers she'd imagined. That was enough. It had to be. It was everything.